everyone, and welcome back to the channel, and to this, the first sort of raw lore video not tied to the streams in quite a while. And I will admit that very late into deciding to do this, I changed up what I was going to do. Originally it was going to be an antagonist of Aphalas video, first one in a while, focusing on Senevia's legions, but with something that is in the works in regards to her little allies up in the north, the old ice elves. Instead, we're doing something a bit different, and we're going to look in detail at what exactly the Arach-nyluth Archipelago does. So, to begin with, the Archipelago is not like Destinal Shah or Aracin when they all used to be connected. The Archipelago has, for the most part, always just sort of been there in the corner of the map, that is. It's never really been attached to any other land. There may or may not have been land connecting points at some point, or they might simply be subterranean connecting points. But the main thing to note, to begin with, is how the forces of the Archipelago are actually separated, because there are a few different ones. Firstly, and one that you've probably heard me mention before, you have the sister Isle realms, not realm isles. And the sister Isle realms are aptly named because they were settled upon by two Dracon sisters. And they are the only separate Dracon faction that exists in Aphalas outside of Darrenlau. And their role is very heavily tied to what happens to, well, basically the events of the Archipelago, but they also have some ties back to their own people in Darrenlau. They have some connections down to the Twin Isles. Not much to do with Archipelago, but they also have ties to Aracin before the Agate barrier. They are very heavy focused around the seafaring aspect. That's where a lot of the more mariner type Dracons ended up going. And they do have ties to certain characters who have already been mentioned, like Ganasir, who was a Silver Paladin technically, but spent more of her time actually up in the sister Isle realms instead of the Storm Peak, because she loved the sea. And they are brave, they are hardy warriors, and they do aim to maintain their duties, but they're also more separate and isolated. I guess a way of looking at it is, if you were to look at like the idea of Lord of the Rings, and you look at the elves of Linden and also the dwarves of Ered-Luin, like, they're both forces of good, but they're just so far detached from everything else that it's quite difficult for the sister Isle realms to end up getting involved in the events that start from Shah, because they're just so far away from it. But they do undergo trade, and they have participated in many different naval battles, and yes, with where it is at war at the moment, they are going to get tied up to all of this chaos that's going on with Rorne and what he's doing up in Aracin. But moving on from that, then we have a next one, and out of all regions of Aphalas, this is probably one that I haven't looked too much into yet, It's actually more ironic that I actually may have some ideas or plans relating to them post the Defenders of Aphalas trilogy, so they could play some interesting roles in that. But you have the Isle of Mayajarn. The Isle of Mayajarn is the only, again similar to the Dragons, is the only territory separated from, well, now the God Realm of Arach-nyluth. I used to just be Aracin because there used to be another Kirindrek territory up here, but it got destroyed a long while ago. Kinareth, the Ice Realm. But Mayajarn is the only other area where you would find Kirindrek. And just as a reminder, the Kirindrek are the holders of the God Realm of Arach-nyluth, and alongside Darenthal are the most magical, in-tuned species on Aphalas. Not counting the Ice Elves in that, because the Ice Elf ability to become in tune and all of that was almost more artificial, not artificial, but like manufactured. Like they didn't start out like that, whereas the Dragons and the Kirindrek did. And obviously the fundamental differences between the two though are, whilst the Dragons can tap into most of the fields of magic and do so pretty assuredly, the Kirindrek absolutely refuse to use either obsidian or, I believe, feldspar magic, because they don't believe in disturbing the land. They do not believe in uprooting nature or the course of life, and obviously obsidian being tied to necromancy does that. So they rule out two of them, but they still have ruby, sapphire, and emerald. But the other element of it... No, I think I got that wrong. I think it might be emeralds that they don't use in feldspar. I would have to double check, but I know obsidian's one and there is another. But the thing about the Kirindrek is that they are the only species to have access to the arcane magic agate, the sort of energy bastion, which also ends up creating the Aphalas barrier. The agate barrier that initially, or ends up fully holding Aracin within it, cutting Aracin off from almost everything else. And the Kirindrek and Mayajarn are pretty much one of the few exceptions to that. They can get through, but even with that access point, the conjuring of the barrier does create far more distance between the two. So they become, whilst it does happen and whilst they can still access, it definitely becomes far more of a strained relationship, because there's also another element that doesn't help to the straining, and that's their relationship with Ancestornir. I mean, they get on quite well with the Sister Realm Isles and the Dark's Bastion, I will get into in a little bit, but with the Sister Isle Realms, I said Realm Isles again, they work together a lot in joint missions and objectives, so as they're the two protector races present. But Ancestornir is also, whilst it doesn't actually have a noted settlement, it is occupied, only it's occupied by actually an offshoot of the Fayuk mountain holders, so the Fayun humans. And obviously the thing about them is that they all kicked off and came from the Icy of Aracin all over the place, the Serpent's Coil, other areas. But obviously, referring back to the Revlerol video, some of their ancestors came down to Destinor and helped create Revlerol, the Kingdom of the Hills. And so they did manage to it's actually quite ironic how the one of the few sets of humans that did not originate in Destinal ended up spreading out the furthest. Many went to the mountain holds, others went elsewhere, some ended up siding with Senevia and the Ice Elves, others descended into the Great Steppe and the tribes, and others went and settled Ancestonir. And they are... I mean, all in all, with the exception of the connection to the Ice Elves, the mountain holds are one of the most neutral forces in all of Aphalas, and probably one of the ones that trumps them are their cousins in Ancestonir. They very much just keep to themselves a lot of the time, but there are some rogue elements that also like to conduct raids, or they've had squabbles against those who have sometimes settled the Tourmaline Isles, but at the same time they've also had squabbles and issues with the Kirindrek. And yeah, you've got hardy humans bred from the ice and things going up against the warrior-like tiger humanoids of Aphalas. So it's a bit of an interesting mix of combat there. But other times, as much as they do skirmish, other times they do also help them. Some of the up-and-coming lore stuff and some of the stuff that Rawne plays, it affects them just as much as others. And also it is noted that they are one of the few interactions they actually have with anyone from Destinal in terms of the humans is Morgana and her journey. Because there are some figures there that get tied to Ancestonir as well. So there's all sorts of different bits and bobs there, but they are geographically in a bit of a really awkward spot. They're at the northeast. The closest thing to them is a desolate sea of ice. Like, outside of the archipelago, that is the closest thing to them. So they're fairly isolated from many other things. Although to be honest, if they did go far enough north, they would eventually run into the south of Arach-nyluth. Because yes, to establish, Aphalas is a spherical globe. It's not a straight line. So these things do connect, it's just the sea is a very vast area. So there's a lot of separation between the north and the south. In some cases, in other cases you've got things like Aracin, which is relatively close. And obviously the issue with Arach-nyluth is that it has the ruby mist still surrounding it, so most things can't get through. But moving on from the three more stable occupant areas, you then have the mysterious Tourmaline Isles. Now, one faction that I've name dropped a few times in Aphalas, but I've not gone into any detail of, are the Sapphire Phantoms, the first sort of major faction of pirates that have ever existed in Aphalas. And effectively the Tourmaline pirates, the ones who then go and settle the isle, they begin as a sort of separate faction because there's a pirate civil conflict that happens, but then the Sapphire Phantoms end up getting defeated and the Tourmaline pirates inadvertently become the there are other factions of pirates that come and go, but they're the only ones that are still of the major significance. Like, the other factions are going to float about and things, but and skirmish with them, but they conduct their operations from the archipelago. And whilst it's an interesting area and they do conduct raids where they can, they set out on effectively almost like Viking raids. They set out on long voyages that they aim to be gone for a long while, not come and then they'll just stop. They'll come back, stop by a tavern, and then go. No, when they go for a long while. With one of their favoured areas actually being going after like the north of Archipelago, using enchanters and things like that to bypass the ruby mist. And there have also been other notes, like the trolls have faced up against them, the dragons have, some humans have. The tourmaline pirates and the sapphire phantoms both consist of a very wide variety of species. There are humans present, there are sea elves present, which is one of the big things. There are a lot of sea elf individuals from... Well, and here comes an interesting theory, because the sea elves, which were another consideration for today's video, yes, they have their 4 colonies here. You've got Stionha, Renarin, Calavron, and Linnea. When the sea elves started out, they had 6 colonies. Well, actually, no, that's incorrect. When the sea elves first originated, they originated off of Gallicaros, but many of them ended up leaving to avoid... Basically to avoid what happened, getting caught in the war between the Stone Elves and the Beast Elves. But many of them found their colony home in Steagris, but there were 2 others. Now, it was established and it was decided a long while ago that the other 2 colonies were going to be on Shar, because they would get assimilated into the Dark Elves. But there is also a fair reasoning, and a completely fair reasoning, to suggest that not all of them wanted to be assimilated and the rest took their ships and fled. And you never know, they could be the ancestors or still the proprietors of what were the Sapphire Phantoms and are now different mini factions, and then the big faction of the Tourmaline pirates. So you've got the Sea Elves, after that little tangent. You've got goblins, you've got ogres, you've got half-ogres, you've got... Again, it's a wide variety. You've got some rogue elements of demons in there, you've got maybe even a few twisted Ajati in there as well, like, well, maybe not, but not twisted, but maybe corrupted. Not corrupt either, but just corrupt in their nature, like greedy and stuff, because Ajati are, alongside Dracons, are the only 2 species that cannot actually be corrupted by evil magic. And whilst they do conduct their raids all over the place, and obviously against the sister realms, Major and Ancestor, many occasions have led to their leaders having a particular interest in Natarg's Bastion. And I will also note that whilst these do not have names at the moment, there might be names. There'll be names for the cities probably, but I don't know if there will be names for every individual island. But Natarg's Bastion is a very interesting spot. It is occupied, safeguarded and defended by 2 different forces. You have the Natarg's people, the giant scorpions, one of the ancient creatures, one of the ancient protectors of Aphalas. Pretty much one of the only ones that wasn't really counted under the Thornwrath, as they had their own duty. But beyond that, you also have another force. You have the Amethyst Protectors, a mixture of volunteer Dracons, volunteer Kirindrek, so primarily those 2. There are an odd element of humans that join, and a few other rogue individuals here and there, but primarily it's Dracon and Kirindrek who join. and they swear themselves to safeguard the Bastion of Natog and the treasure it protects. Very similar to how, well, you have the Temple Guard of Galeria, who was sworn to protect the temple and also Destinal when it's under threat. And you also have, even though they serve a bit of a different role, you have the Marek Sin Wardens protecting the passage against the demons, the first demons. So it's another order like that. And for a very long time, the thing that was actually being protected in Natog's Bastion was the crown of Aphalas, the Amethyst Crown. Hence the name Amethyst Protectors. But Natog's Bastion has also served other purposes as well. It was a protector of the crown before the crown got stolen and then retrieved and then basically moved down to Lossakoth. Down to Lossakoth, where he was kept safe under the careful watch of primarily the Ajati, actually. But there have been other groups and things. The most notable of all of them is that for a long while, Natog's Bastion is where Sinetvia was imprisoned. The corruptor, evil form, evil physical form, that is. And they held her captive and many of her old original bestial sprites. And when she escaped, leading into the crisis of Galakaros, it was a very brutal and chaotic battle where you had the Amethyst Protectors and many of who remained of Natog's people, in terms of the giant scorpions, fighting against Sinetvia, her bestial sprites, and some other allies. And basically the battle, I need to do an actual piece on that battle because that battle is intense, but Sinetvia ends up escaping, so they do fail in their mission. But yeah, it was... Natog's Bastion is both a protection area, but is also a prison, and the Amethyst Protectors and Natog's people are the Wardens and the Guards, and there have been other elements in there as well. Scorpion blood got spilt and stolen. The Scorpio Korith got created from it, the terrifying mix of the Korith Adar demons, the giant hulking ones, and the flippin' power and also the venom of these giant scorpions. And those creatures became so devastating on the battlefield that, as I've noted before, most forces in the Protector races act, and with help of other groups such as the Sparrow Hawks, one of the few times that they took a key part in all of this, to actively hunt down every Scorpio Korith they could find, because they were just too dangerous. And yeah, it's the Archipelago, out of all the lands on Aphalas, was the last to be added, but it serves a very unique role in all of it, because it's scattered between multiple different factions. They're not directly aligned with the Protector races. They're certainly not aligned with Nagrasek. They're certainly not aligned with Sinetvia or any other rogue element. They are effectively out there on their own, but it's arguable that above everyone else, especially in terms of the Natog's Bastion, Mayajon, and the Sister R realms, above everything else they serve Aphalas. It's almost like, whilst... because there are different ways of looking at this. You've got the original creators. You've got Nagrasax Demesne, the Dark Elves and some ogres who serve Nagrasak. You have Galeria, who many of the human factions on Destinal, the Dracons, the Trolls, the Ajati to a point, they all serve without question a lot of the time. Then you've got the wild forces, the ancients, but then also things like the Wood Elves and to an extent the Forest Dwarves, who lean more to serving Amendiel, as do many of the goblins. And Senevia obviously has her own legions who she corrupts, the demons that went all scatter, but then also the domain of the Ice Elves. So you've got all of these different forces and everything, and you could argue that these selection, especially these four, are one of the few areas in all of Aphalas that primarily serve, above everything else, the Father. And one thing I did forget to mention in the Amethyst Protectors, another element of an ancient people who get mentioned from time to time, but there's still a long history about them. There are still, whilst there are no Ajati as a part of the Amethyst Protectors, Owlfolk are. There is a specific force of Owlfolk who do serve under that banner as well. So they've appeared again. And yeah, the actual battle when Senevia escapes is quite devastating and costly. The crown gets stolen at some point, as I mentioned. What happens to the Amethyst crown in this is a bit complicated, because somehow, and I've got some notes but I haven't fully fleshed out the story, so it is slightly subject to change at the moment, but the crown ends up falling into the hands of the Ice Elves, and the Ice Elves attempt to use the crown to basically bring forward and corrupt Nissa there, the Dragon of Darkness. They want to use his power effectively and that's what that's effectively the antagonist plot behind Aphalas Shadow Dance, which was the D&D. And basically that happens. They do get bested, they do get undone and defeated, but then out of nowhere, Rorne ends up stealing the crown. So the crown is not fully retrieved yet. He ends up stealing it. He attempts to utilize it elsewhere, and it doesn't work because he gets intercepted. I think that's tied to the stuff he tries to do with Khan's there, and we're corrupting the old Dracon King. Or not corrupting, but basically possessing, almost. But it doesn't work, and the crown is then secured, and it is temporarily returned to Natag's Bastion, but after a while it's deemed that maybe, especially after all the damage from fighting that, from having to deal with other attacks and also Senevia escaping, it's determined that maybe the crown is not the safest spot there, and maybe it needs to be put under closer watch, which is why it ends up going to Lossakoth, where it sits and waits under very close eye of the Ajati, because whilst the Ajati are primarily around Calastenir and Eregion, there are Ajati who make active trips to Lossakoth, and also Lossakoth being the haven it is, it's got, well, I say it's got Cathaltir to its north, but obviously Cathaltir is going to be descending into a civil war soon. You've got the Temple Guard, you've got the Ajati, you've also got all of Talonzer with the Trolls, and you've got the Dracons nearby as well. So even if Lossakoth did fall under threat and the crown fell under threat, there are many forces that can go and intervene. But yeah, I think for now that's all I really have to cover. Um, there is going to be more lore writing soon, it's just with everything else going on, I'm just trying to prioritise tasks and sort things through, but with all of that going on, the Archipelago already has quite a bit that happens on it, and I will also note that Natog's Bastion never used to be the only place with the giant scorpions, and I am theorising about the idea, with especially the name, that maybe they weren't the only giant creatures there at once. And if that's the case, what happened to the others? Where are they? And things like that. Especially on the Tourmaline Isles. There's the Tourmaline Isles and Ancestor. There's a lot that I could do with those four, I think. But yes, that's going to be where this wraps up for today. So I hope you all enjoyed. There are going to be a few edited bits and bobs in here, as you've hopefully seen, with some pictures pop up from here and there. None of the factions in the Archipelago actually have their established coat of arms yet, so some of the pictures are a bit choosy and things, but I hope you all enjoyed. Please do comment, like and subscribe. Please do comment for what bits of Aphalas or Soul of the Gem or Code of Chivalry that you'd like to see me cover on the channel. And yeah, please do share, and I would say please check out the links in the description, but obviously the new ending's going to do that for me. So until then, I will say welcome to the Kingdom of Aphalas and the world of Fellowmind books. Thank you all for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you would like to see some similar content to this one, you can click there. Or if you would like to change around and have an explore of some of the other content, then you can check out the link below, which will be to a playlist. And if you would like to check out the content on other pages or socials, or if you would like to explore some of the other elements in detail, or pick up a book or whatever, or come and chat to me on Twitch when I'm alive, then down there. And as you can see, it has a list of what to expect on each of those platforms. And until next time, welcome to the Kingdom of Aphalas, the world of Fellowmind books. Please do like, please do subscribe, and if you want to, pop out a comment.